Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. I just had a fantastic conversation with Reverend Darrell Hamilton. You gotta listen. This is a powerful conversation about enemy love, how you navigate a world of white Christian nationalism, how the white church... Anyway, I'm gonna stop right there. You just need to listen. That's all I'm gonna say. You need to listen. Really good conversation. And also, you can find Darrell on TNE Connect. It's our community space that we offer to everyone who's listening. It's a totally free space. We do free classes there. And Darrell's currently leading a class on Black liberation theology. You can go to thenewevangelicals.com/connect to join. Again, it's totally free. Hey, check out this episode. Hope you enjoy it. Talk to y'all later. All right, friends, welcome in. We have Reverend Darrell Hamilton, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Jamaica Plains.
That's right.
Not to be confused with a First Baptist.
That's
right.
That's right. The
That's a
First
thing.
Baptist. We want to be clear. There was no Baptist church here in Jamaica Plain until us. We are the First Baptist Church in Jamaica Plain.
I love it, my friend. Well, welcome to the show again.
Yes.
You know, a lot has changed since I had you on last, including you are now on the board of the New Evangelicals, which is also very cool.
Yes, man. It's been great being a part of the board of directors. It's just great being a part of the TNE community. Just such a wonderful group of people who are also really dedicated and inspired by this work. I got a chance to talk with our board chair just a couple of weeks ago and just expressing to her not only my gratitude, but just how inspired I am by this work. Being inspired by being around other people who themselves are inspired really helps for a great environment to be a part of and to be successful in.
No, for sure. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, we're doing this series on Black liberation leaders in the church and in culture, and you are someone who I know is deeply involved in this work, which is great. One thought I had to kind of kick us off is the word Baptist seems to have a lot of different meanings depending on what we're talking about, right? We have the Southern Baptist Convention. Then you said that your church is called the Baptist Church, right? And so
the first.
I'm so sorry. The First Baptist Church of Jamaica Plains. Can you help me understand? Because my version of Baptist, how I understood it, I bet is pretty radically different from how you use that term in your tradition. Can you break that down for me? I'm really curious.
Yeah, I can actually, and thank you for that question. So, I think it's really important for people to understand that what makes Baptist is the fact there is room for so much diversity. That the whole understanding around what it means to be Baptist is churches that are autonomous, churches that are congregationalists, but what unites us as Baptists are the distinctions around freedom of conscience, freedom of religious practice, freedom to read Bible, freedom to encounter God. And so whenever you have Roger Williams, who's actually, founded the First Baptist Church in America in Providence, Rhode Island, which is just a couple of miles from where I am right now. The fifth oldest Baptist church in the world is here in Boston as well. And so Roger Williams, in founding, Baptist life, he founded it on this idea of freedom of belief, freedom of practice. And so when you have all these Baptist churches, that's why you see such a diversity, because you do have people who are like, hey, we want to practice our faith in a particular way. And under a Baptist sort of understanding, we can do that. Now, the Baptist churches were all united for, many years until the issue of slavery came to be. And so I actually was reading an article just a couple of days ago that reminded me of this, that before the United States split over the issue of slavery, the church split first. And so where you had in Baptist life, the Northern and Southern Baptists were divided around, can you be Christian and a minister of the gospel and hold slaves. And so the Southern Baptist Convention went one way, the
Right.
Northern Baptist Convention went a different way. Years later, you have a civil war, where the country is continuing to sort of unravel around this issue and this question. Um, but yeah, and so our denomination as Baptists, we align with what used to be known as the Northern Baptists, now what's just called the American, Baptist Churches USA instead of Northern Baptists. But it is a denomination that is still within itself very diverse, where you have a multiplicity of ideas around sexuality and gender identity and women in ministry. But the idea that we hold to as American Baptists is that all of these things can still exist under the tent that is Baptist life. And because what unifies us as Baptists are the distinctions we hold specifically around freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of practice, and our freedom to engage with God.
Okay, that is helpful because the SBC, Southern Baptist Convention, which to my understanding, even still today, is the largest conglomerate of evangelical churches in America, they obviously don't have that same approach. I mean, there's a lot of infighting over, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the Christian Nationalists are there trying to pull the SBC even further to the right. They literally kicked out, I think it was Rick Warren's church or one of those mega churches, because they ordained a woman as pastor, and they kicked him out of the convention over that, right? That's how firm they are on that issue.
That's right.
And it is interesting that most people don't realize that the SBC was founded in 1845, like you said, over the right to own other human beings, right? Race-based chattel slavery was the linchpin. It was the crux that made those leaders go, we're going to split from the Baptists so we can own other people. And is it any wonder then that the SBC today stands for things that seem incredibly oppressive still to this day?
Well, again, I mean, what we are living through right now is sort of the outgrowth of policies enacted 60 years ago through the rise of what was, the moral majority, movement. We have Falwell, you have Paul Weyrich, and forget the other guy's name off the top of my head right now. There's big three of them. But
Maybe
they did
Ralph
a lot
Reed.
of that.
That's another big one.
Yeah. Like they did a lot of that work infiltrating through the Southern Baptist Convention, where you had these movements for more fundamentalism, which then moves towards more evangelicalism. And so in the late 80s, early 90s is when you start to see this really strong push, especially within Southern Baptist seminaries, where they are starting to oust individuals who are teaching liberation theologies, churches that are ordaining women, questions around sexual identity and queer identity. And so the seminary that I graduated from, Wake Forest School of Divinity, is a product of that, of the result of teachers and educators within Southern Baptist seminaries being ousted. And so they, ordaining women became an issue, which it wasn't always an issue. Just like issues around abortion wasn't always an issue. It wasn't an issue until it was politicized in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
And so there were many women ordained in the Southern Baptist Convention up until the mid to late 80s, early 90s is when you start seeing these shifts happen because of the push of fundamentalism within the movement.
Yeah, there's actually a term for it. I'm looking it up really quick. I think, it's called the conservative resurgence. This happened in the 80s. You're right. Because if people don't know this, the SBC had a pro-choice policy on abortion when it was first legalized. I mean, you can read their statements. It's essentially a very moderate position on abortion. And obviously now they totally shifted. So help me understand, Darrell, in your tradition, American Baptist, it's you said that you can hold a plethora of different views and still kind of get along. How do you do that? How do you do that? Because I feel like even as now a deconstructed Christian who's more progressive, I have a hard time with certain things. There are some things where I'm like, I'm sorry, I cannot, be in like fellowship with you if you think certain things about maybe MAGA or about like that kind of stuff. So help me understand like where the lines are for you or maybe for the tradition and how you navigate the real complexity of that.
Yeah, so I'll keep it to me because it's very complex, and so like even within the American Baptist tent, there's room, but it doesn't mean there's not a lot of push and pull that happens within that. It doesn't mean that you don't have this is a strong term, but infiltrators trying to move the denomination or move particular churches in particular theological directions. And honestly, people could say that happens on right sides and left sides,
Sure.
right? And so it's a very complicated thing to navigate. But what keeps the denomination and people who want to stay aligned in the denomination connected, again, is these distinctions, these Baptist distinctions around freedom and soul freedom. That was the one I was forgetting earlier. Soul freedom, the ability to be free to practice our faith. And so if I'm free and I want that freedom for you, Tim, and I want that freedom for my other, colleague or cousin over here and what they doing, I have to be as difficult as that could be. I have to be consistent in that. And so for myself, how I practice that is along a similar vein of I believe that people have the right, especially in this country, to free exercise of religion, even when it's different than mine.
Yeah.
And that's not just interdenominational. That's also ecumenical. That's also interreligious, right? And so in order to be consistent, we have to hold to that. What we're seeing in this political climate is that there actually are people in the ways that they want to practice their religion, trying to keep others from having freedom to practice theirs as well.
Right.
And so how I exist in that, the best I can, is with grace. That's the only way I can navigate it. Grace and love of neighbor, love of people, although we are diametrically opposed theologically, religiously, politically, I have to, as best I can, try to keep my love for you at the forefront of my engagement with you. I have family members, I have friends who do not align with me theologically, who do not align with me politically. I have to work within myself as best I can to not allow those things, even though, and we can have the spirited conversation, have the spirited disagreement, and yet I still gonna say I love you. I'm still gonna say I want you to have the freedoms that I want you to have, that I also feel that you might be trying to restrict from other people. And I'm thinking about, in Bible, we really have examples of these types of intra-religious conflicts taking place in our New Testament, especially in Acts.
Right.
Because you got Peter and you got Paul, broadly speaking, representing two different sort of schools of thought about what it means to follow Jesus and how you do that, who is in and who is out.
Right.
And we take for granted, you and I take for granted, that we are the beneficiaries of the Pauline school of thought that allows Gentiles, non-Jewish people, to be included in this idea about God's redemptive and salvific plan for the world, without us having to change anything about ourselves to be included in it, which is what Peter's school of thought would have said, right? That you have to adhere to particular dietary restrictions. You only can associate with certain types of people. You have to do certain things to your body. If you know what I mean. If you identify as
can,
man.
Can you be very explicit, please? yeah, I follow you. I'm tracking.
And so that was a strong school of thought. And we have the debate documented in our scriptures.
Right.
And we could debate, have the theological debate about Paul. We could have the theological debate about Christendom and the establishment of Christianity. But what we have inherited is the result of the Pauline sort of school and influence winning out in that debate. And so, but Paul and Peter still met and spent time with each other in Jerusalem. Jesus also had to spend some time working with Peter. One of my favorite scriptures is Acts 10 and 15, where we talk about in that chapter where Peter has the vision of the sheep, and he sees the unclean, quote unquote, animals in the sheep. Yep. And it's like, the voice says, eat. And people, I've never touched an unclean thing. And the word of God, and it's Jesus, and I know it's Jesus who said it because it's read in my Bible in Acts. And so because it's read, I know it's the voice of Jesus. Jesus says, do not call what I have made clean unclean.
Yeah.
And that statement is not about food. It's about people. It's about the ethne, the Gentile that is being referred to, that Jesus says, do not call what I've made clean unclean. And so as best I can, and I'm not always good at it, we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. But I try my best to see the goodness, the grace within people, even as we have disagreements. And I pray to Almighty God that God can open their eyes in places and ways that I might not be able to.
Okay, I'm with you. I think that's great. So obviously, I'm sure you know where I'm going to go because you and I talk pretty often offline. I ask this question a lot to different guests because I really wrestle with it. Like, this is not just a question for the sake of a question. It's something that I really am thinking about pretty often with how we navigate our current political climate, right? Because I'm with you, and that sounds nice until I see my neighbor or my friends cheering on the kidnapping of a 5-year-old and being sent down to Texas, right, with his dad. Or until I see whoever talking about how this administration, or how Biden wants to trans kids, and how those kids are just under demonic influence, like things like that, or I see my neighbor talk about or recite Charlie Kirk's bogus line about prowling blacks, or about the black pilot who he's scared of when he's on the plane because of DEI. And I go, look, I people might not believe me because my public presence is pretty direct and pretty blunt, but I actually really deal a lot in my personal life in nuance and in gray and in the complexity of things. But when it comes to some of these things we're seeing today and that we've seen in history, how do you navigate what you just said with like also taking the stand and drawing the lines of like, look, if you're not at least here, I don't know how we navigate any kind of connection going forward, because we live in two different realities of how we understand the world. So I would love kind of your thoughts as a pastor. You're pastoring in the Northeast. You're part of the Black liberation tradition. How do you think about that?
Man, that's a really, really good question. I'm going to just be on Front Street with you. So I don't have a perfect answer for you. A lot of these things I sort of take, I hate to say case by case, individual by individual. One of the things, though, that came to my mind, let me just say it first off like this. Like you, I am unapologetic and unashamed about where I stand.
Yeah.
That's known and that's clear. And so folks also know that if they're going to engage with me in conversation, they already know what they're, essentially going to get with that.
Right.
I make no, I think the phrase is no bones about that. I think that's the phrase. But I don't hide
make
that.
no apologies about it.
Make no apologies for that. Thank you. That's better. And so that's one thing. So I don't tell you or tell anybody that you have to soften or lessen or quiet your conviction about what you feel is right and what you feel God has put on you to be right and to speak that. And while we do that, how do we engage with people and try to pierce through to the core of folks' humanity? Now, a lot of these people, I believe, have chosen to sacrifice their humanity on the altar of whatever God they're choosing to serve now. Whether that's the God of white supremacy, whether that's the God of capitalism, whether that's the God of Donald Trump. There are a lot of folks who have chosen to sacrifice themselves, and there's no reaching that. I can't reach that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we necessarily should try or have to try. But I think we don't really know that until we seek to try to engage and pierce through to get to it. I think there's truth to that. I can assume, by hearing people's protests and seeing people's social media posts where their quote unquote humanity is, but I don't know unless I am engaging with them more directly. And so being a pastor positions me to be able to do that in ways I don't know if all people are afforded that opportunity. And as a pastor, I think my call sort of requires me to do that in a way that not everybody's call might require them to do that. And so I do want to put that nuance into the conversation too, because I feel my call as a pastor as
Right.
well is not to just throw people away.
Right.
I think my call as a pastor is to try to engage more deeply with folks and see, if not even like we can find common ground, but like where we can express or hear each other's common humanity.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've tried my best to cultivate is how do I listen with grace? And what I mean by that is a lot of people. So when the day of Pentecost came and the Spirit descended, everybody was speaking in new tongues. Glossolalia in that text literally means, or it was, I don't even think it is glossolalia in that text, but whatever. But what they're saying in Acts, people speaking different languages, actual language, not gibberish. And so, but you had people who were able to interpret, to hear the different languages spoken. And so to know all the different nations and languages that were being represented in that space. So it's not just that the Spirit gave us the power of utterance, but also gave us the gift of hearing and interpretation.
Right.
And so I think that there is a element of the call. How do we try to listen where people are using words they themselves may not fully understand, using words that are just simply limited to the lexicon that they have, and trying to hear what people are in fact trying to say, not trying to pretend that it's not racist when it's racist, or sexist when it's sexist, or homophobic when it's homophobic. But, oh, you did say that. Okay, cool. So I'm going to tell you what I heard you say. I'm going to interpret that to you and back to you. And let's see what you do with that new information now. Are you intending to speak racist language in this moment? Or is it that there's just some learning and some growth that has not or needs to happen in this process? But again, as a pastor, I feel that's a unique call that I have. And I think that it is an element where, for Christian folk, we have always been diverse.
Yeah.
Not just the Baptist church, but the body of Christ is always meant to be diverse. And we've all been called to still be a part of the same body.
Yeah.
And I say this often, and forgive me if I'm accustomed to say it, so forgive me for those. But like, the body of Christ is that, the eye can't say to the hand, I have no need of you. The hand can't say to the eye or to the foot. But everybody has an asshole. But you cannot say to the asshole that I have no need of you. Because everybody needs an asshole. And so
I'm telling the board president, I'm telling Rebecca what you.
And so I'm just saying though, so if an asshole is necessary to the health of the body of Christ, I can't say I have no need of you. And I need to be careful to know, am I the asshole in this body? It's easy to assume that I might not be. And so if we're all called to be a body, in the body, and serve a role in the body, how do we consistently strive to be in healthy relationship with one another? I think that is the challenge that Jesus puts on us to navigate, and never gives us the answers on how to actually resolve. Oh, I think I lost your audio.
There we go. I'm here. Sorry.
All
I
right,
hit the wrong button. It was on my end. I'll make a marker of that to edit it later.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's really helpful. This is also, to use some evangelicalese, I have the more prophetic tone in a lot of my content and my approach. I'm more of like, this is wrong. I'm calling it out. Screw your feelings. This is reality. And then we need that. But we also need the pastoral side. Like my friend Ben Kramer, like his approach to content, his heart is just so different, right? And it's needed. Like it's so good. I think it's needed in the world. And so I think you need both of you need the people who are going to be kind of fiery, have that fire in their belly, and it just has to come out. And then you need people who are able to hold space for the folks who might be in process. And frankly, I have to get better at that because I was once in process too. I'm still in process in a lot of ways, right? And I think a lot of us who deconstruct, when we get to a point where we're like, we feel like we're on the other side but still exploring, it's easy to look back at other people who are where we used to be and just judge them so hard. Right? How come you're not fully affirming yet? How come you haven't read this book? How come you don't know who James Cone is yet? You're not there. Work harder. And ultimately, it's discouraging, right? Especially online. Like, it's discouraging. And I think
I'm laughing.
Why?
Because that was me after my first year of seminary. So I totally understand what you're saying.
That was me too. I mean, that to a degree, that has always been me. I've been working on it. But even when I'll tell you a funny story. I never told this story on air before. I'm going to tell you, Darrell, because I think you'll enjoy it. So back in the day when I was still pretty evangelical, I went through a big phase where I just realized that megachurch culture and the modern day evangelical church structure was broken. I was reading books by a guy named Frank Viola called Pagan Christianity. I was just having this moment of like, the infrastructure is so bad. And I remember sitting in my church listening to my pastor preach and just judging the heck out of him. I'm like, this guy has no clue what he's talking about, and the church is broken, and blah, 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 blah. I look back, and I'm like, I think my heart was in the right place, but man, I didn't know. Like, I wasn't aware of the complexities yet, And so it is funny because, I think we've all kind of been there, right? Where we think that we just know. And honestly, I think that's where wisdom and humility comes into play. So you can do that in healthier ways, right?
Well, it's making me think about when you always have those new converts too. I've been Christian for 35 years. You've been Christian for 3 minutes, and you over here telling me I'm going to hell. because you just read something,
right?
I think all of us can relate to exactly what you're talking about in various different stages in life. And again, my first year of seminary, I essentially, get put in front of a buffet and they're like, eat your fill.
Right.
And I'm over here getting and grabbing stuff I never seen before, but it looked good, things I have maybe had before. And I'm going back to people from home like, you ain't never heard of this? You ain't never heard of that? Yeah, I'm on Facebook writing dissertation level comments, to folks about how, and I know people just sit back in the cut just watching.
Yeah.
But it has its purpose, right? And think about someone like a James Cone. I was just leading the educational course on Black liberation theology.
For TNE Connect for our community space. It's worth signing up for, folks. You can join for free. The newevangelicals.com/connect. It's really great.
Yes, and it was fun to teach that. And in James Cone's memoir, when he talks about how he moved into the creation of Black liberation theology, he describes it within himself. There was a fire that caught a hold of him. Yeah. And he just could not, he could not keep it to himself. That's an old gospel song right there too, and, and so like, there's a way in which folks who are deconstructing, folks that are, sort of maybe just finding faith for the first time, it gets a fire in you. Yeah. And I think that's why I'm not trying to be all preachy, but I think that's why the early church, that takes off like it does too in many ways, because there's a fire that catches you. And so we need that, and God can use that. And I think wisdom and time also are bedfellows.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. That's honestly why I love my 30s so far. I'm 37, and I feel like this is the age where I have maybe 1 or 2 drops of wisdom, just enough history behind me where I know a thing or two, but also I'm still young and energetic and have like the energy to do what I'm doing, right? Because I'm not always going to have this kind of energy or time or even passion. But I do feel like this time in my life has been that way, where it's like, I've looked at myself in the past and been like, oops. I mean, dude, one time I have pastors that I've apologized to. I'm like, I'm sorry for trying to burn your church down. I'm sorry for I started a small group in someone's church. It was a church plant. And like it grew really quick. And dude, I was judging. This was a church that met in a movie theater. Okay, they had 2 lights behind the stage just to light up the back white screen, and I'm judging that in the small group. This is too showy. This is biblical, and in the whole crew, they're all young adults. Yeah, you're right. I literally have a mutiny on my hands. Right, I'm like, I'm getting this crew stirred up, and then they sent an associate pastor to split the group up because it got too big. And I'm like, don't break us up. This is community. You know, I'm like, I was such a thorn in the flesh for this poor pastor. And, you know, I like maybe 10 years later, I was like, dude, I know we haven't talked in a long time. I'm sorry. My heart was in the right place, but man, like I was a pain in your, you know what? So yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's pastoral ministry, man. I think these are just lessons you learn when you're in this vocation. They're hard lessons, you know, and I think, like we need our prophets. Yeah. Without question. We need pastors who could be prophets. We need prophets who could be pastors, pastoral at least. You know, both of these things need to happen. But also, not every prophet is called to be pastoral. Not every pastor is called to be prophetic. Like there are differences there, you know. 100%. But I think, you know, again, I have felt compelled to send a couple of apologies myself, you know, and you know I'll be 36 on March 12th, and you know I recognize, you know, I'm not the 20-something-year-old that I was coming through seminary. And you know, I got older colleagues, and I'm like, look, okay, like I know one day I'm gonna be you. There's gonna be some young buck trying to come and tell me about all the things I'm doing wrong, and you know how progressive I'm not. You know what I mean? Because I don't do this and that and the other thing. Yeah. You know, it's gonna come. It's gonna find me.
It's gonna happen. Right.
It's all I mean. That's what I mean in terms of like seeing the humanity in everybody too. Yeah. You know, it's a critical, not losing sight of that. Yeah. And I think this might be strong language to say, but I think I'll say it like this. We miss the mark as Christian folk or followers of Jesus when we no longer, or when we fail to choose to see the humanity in everybody, even the people that we're in disagreement with, strong disagreement with. You know, that we can see the humanity and still, while being crucified on the cross, call out to God that God would forgive those people who are crucifying us in this moment.
I do think that a key part of any kind of resistance that we participate in now has to be rooted in a strict principle of non-dehumanization of the other, right? Because what's currently happening in America is that it's the dehumanization of the other, right? When you have a president calling people garbage or animals, and then they treat other people like that, right? That is the difference between how you and I are thinking versus how a lot of MAGA people are thinking, right? And so, and I know the how easy it is to slip into that, you know, to slip into this idea of like, no, they are demons. They are animals. And I think that sometimes you need a holy prophetic call to call things what they are. I mean, even Jesus had some strict words, right, at times, right? So I have no problem when it's appropriate calling things evil or bad, but people are still made in the image of God, even if they use that image for chaos, frankly. And I think that we have to keep that in mind as we navigate this, because honestly, I've had to ask myself this: what happens to these people? Like, what do we do with the folks who are on this planet, who are living, breathing humans, who are advocating this stuff? I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in killing them. I don't believe that they're going to get raptured, although that would be kind of nice, you know. But like they're here, right? So the only option I see is two things. First, I see a political obligation to do whatever you can to enshrine certain rights into law, so that way these people can't have that ability legally to do that. But on a cultural, maybe communal side, and I'm not saying everyone has to have this posture. I'm just saying I think the general idea should be a principle of, hey, there's a better way forward. You don't have to live with this hatred. You don't have to live with this judgment. You don't have to live thinking that your immigrant neighbor is a criminal when they're not. Like there's actually repentance is a gift for you to turn from your dehumanizing ways and your hateful ways and to embrace a spirit-filled way of living that embodies the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, etc.
You preaching, Tim? Are we preaching? Are we
I'm kind of
preaching right
preaching. Bottom line, all I'm trying to say is I don't think we can destroy supremacy. I think we have to compost it.
Ooh.
That's not okay. That's not my line. I wish I could say it is. It's from Dr. Roberto Espinoza. It's his line, but I read it in the book and it stuck with me. That we have to compost supremacy. I love that because when you compost something, it gives birth to fertile soil where new things can grow.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. That's powerful. That's powerful.
Agreed.
And I you and me are 100% aligned with what you're saying. I would add to it that I do think this. I don't know if this is coof to say, but I do think there's some quote unquote spiritual warfare going on.
Triggered. I'm triggered. I'm just kidding.
It ain't the Buddhist monks, I tell you that. Yeah. It ain't the Buddhist monks walking for peace.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's some folks that are demon possessed. And I'm saying that a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that though is, even Jesus had to encounter people that were possessed with unclean spirit.
Yeah.
And how are we called to engage with that? Jesus told the disciples some demons only come out through prayer and fasting. Because there might not be no way that we can just, sprinkle some water on it. I think your approach is the right one about what we could do politically in order to protect our institutions and keep things from being codified into law. But there are some folks we can't just spin around 3 times and say in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, get a crucifix, and it's going to fix the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do we do with that? And again, I'm speaking more in a metaphorical sense than a literal sense, just so that way people understand where I'm coming from with that. But there are folks who have, again, chosen to sacrifice their humanity on the altar of evil, on the altar of white supremacy or any supremacy.
Power.
Power, absolutely. And Jesus encountered folks like this too.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so again, but I don't think Jesus, in engaging with the people with unclean spirits, ever forgot they were still people nonetheless.
I actually agree with you on that terminology, and I've gotten to a point where I refuse to let white evangelicals hijack and own terms that I think are perfectly appropriate at times, right? Because the idea of something being demonic, I think what we're saying is there's something beyond what we can understand that is causing someone to act in a way that we cannot fathom, that is hurting people, right? Like that's how I think about it. And look, we live in a modern age. We're a scientific culture. Maybe we have different language for it now than what the ancient Near Eastern world used, right? Demonic versus mental, whatever. But like the idea is there for me. Like sometimes I look at Trump and I go, what is animating this dude? Like, what are the thought processes in his head that are causing these outcomes? Like, there is something that seems like beyond him that is animating what this guy does, right? How can people that I know, how can pastors that I know look at Trump, a man who literally was found liable for sexually assaulting a woman, and they get so blind to that they really will think that God is using this man? What is animating that thought process, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there are times where that language of demonic or satanic is actually the only word that I have for it. Like there's something dark about what is moving through these folks that where they justify a world that rains hell on earth to their neighbors.
And I think that doesn't, just because we name it as that, isn't us trying to give individuals a pass. I think that's where some folks like to try to take it. It's not me, it's this other external thing. Yes. It's like, nah, player. No. It's you.
Right.
And you is on some bull. I won't cuss that time.
Thank you.
You know what part of the body of Christ you are. and you know what's coming out. So
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I have a question for you. So, one of the things, and I meant to hit this earlier, but we got a little distracted down a good path. One of the things I've come to realize is that without white supremacy, there really isn't a black church, because the black church was formed out of this idea of like, we're not welcome in church spaces. We're kicked to the curbs. We have to form our own place for safety as well, right? In a world of white supremacy. And it seems like, as a rule of thumb, and again, I'm generalizing here, the people that I've talked to who are either part of the black church tradition or are black liberation theologians, whatever, seem much more willing to have the dialogue with their white evangelical counterparts, as opposed to the white evangelical world wanting to reach out and have the dialogue with folks like yourself. And I'm thinking about different apologists. I'm thinking about people like Elisa Childers. They're really built around this world of we're right, they're wrong, they're heretical. This is why it's not biblical. This is why it's not gospel. Instead of approaching with curiosity, have you found that to be true in your experience, or have you found churches in your area? I know that you're in the Northeast, where you can talk to some of the pastors who might come from a totally different background than you. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, good little mix. So here in New England, it's a little bit of a bubble. So, I don't find too many folks that don't know about Black liberation theology. And Boston in particular has a history around abolition. With Frederick Douglass having been here, and Harriet Tubman having been here, and William Lloyd Garrison having been here. And so, and don't get it twisted, Boston still got some really interesting history and contradictions, around its quote unquote progressivism.
Yeah.
But when I go back to places like where I'm from, Oklahoma City, it's more of these tensions sort of maybe come up a little bit, and we talked about it again in the course that I was, leading, about how when we're doing theology, understanding not only what theology is, but like who and what theology is for, right? And so, the normative understanding here in America is that what theology is and who theology is for is to maintain whiteness as normative,
Right.
whiteness as universal.
Right.
And when you do that, anything non-white becomes fringe, becomes heretical, becomes other, becomes Gentile, becomes ethne, right? And so, how to sort of broach those conversations, sort of in a bigger sense, take some time and take some massaging with folks, because they first have to kind of even be willing to let their theological imagination be opened.
Yes.
That's the first hurdle. And then also, what we're seeing right now is just such a rampant sense of anti-intellectualism.
Yes.
A strong sense of a lack of expertise, or a distrust in expertise, is a big thing. And so when you start even bringing up this history and these nuanced, experiences, also having people just unwilling to want to engage in the history, in the criticism, right? Because you was a part of this. You saw it where this white woman in this big evangelical church is talking about, there's no black church. It's just, it's just the church.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And everybody's like,
it was her name's Maleficent, and she is in Australia. She's out of Australia. And Andrew Cedra is like either her brother-in-law. Anyway, yes, they are Christian nationalists. They work with Turning Point USA. I know the video. She's almost like yelling on the mic, right? You're talking,
yeah. And it's like, okay, so let's talk about how it is though in the church. Again, how the black church had to come to be.
Exactly.
Because white folks, even here in the North, did not want to worship alongside black people. And so Henry Louis Gates has a great book. I'm blanking on the title. If I remember it, I'll send it to you, and we can try to add something.
Who's the author?
Henry Louis Gates.
Okay.
And he's making the argument. Stony the Road. That's what it's called. Stony the Road. And he's talking about how people can be anti-slavery and still be anti-black.
Yep.
Just because they were anti the institution of slavery didn't mean they wanted to live and worship with black people.
Right.
And so when you have in the North, in the Methodist Church, they have a whole section for black folks up in the balcony, and we can't take communion alongside our white Christian brethren and sisterin. And so Richard Allen has to go start a church because of it. Like that, like those are the parts of the history that people do not want, white folks, broadly speaking, do not want to really have to engage with and have an answer for. Right. And so and then it's like, okay, when we come in and we do hoop when we worship, we do a lot of dancing, and we get a little loud when we preach, like, why does that, what makes that so abrasive feeling?
Right.
For white people. And I think at the end of the day, it's because, anti-blackness doesn't mean that you necessarily hate Darrell, but you hate, or there's a hatred or a discomfort with the things of me, the black things of me, you know what I mean, that just sort of come out, and the things that you want to commodify, how you think it's cool that I walk with a limp, you know what I mean, and I talk with a particular cadence, but don't let me get too loud, because then you got to go turn the microphones down because I'm offending your ears, So those are some of the things that I have navigated. But again, having people willing to even just engage in the conversation is the first piece.
Well, I want to bring up this video clip that I think is relevant to this part of the conversation. I want your reaction to it. So this is a clip, and for folks who are listening, oh, that's the wrong button. I erased you. That wasn't intentional. There we go.
Come on, man. I'm sorry. It's Black History Month.
Wrong button. I swear. For those of you who are watching,
that's what I always say. Wrong button. I heard that before.
For those listening on podcast, I'm pulling up a clip of Josh Howerton. Now, Josh Howerton's a mega church pastor. He's blown up online. He's gotten hyper right-wing political, over 1 million followers on Instagram. He's going viral all the time. And he made this video. I'm only going to play part of it, but I think this actually kind of demonstrates your point, Darrell, of like how the white church just completely overlooks other churches that are not like them. So I'm going to play this clip, and then we'll get into it. The title on the guy's video, for those who can't see, says the most controversial truth about Christianity and politics. So here we go. Here's what he says.
Literally any pastor in America knows what I'm about to say is true. They just have not grappled with the reality and the implications of what I'm about to say. If you want the advancement of the gospel and the growth of the church to get significantly smothered in your state or your city, here's all you got to do. Let it go blue. That's simply what data shows. I'll say it like this. Show me a map of the most progressive areas in our nation. Then show me a map of the areas in our nation that have the fewest churches. It's the same map. So my point is that the advancement of generally and correctly defined political conservatism, it is a significant and powerful force for pre-evangelism because it installs a plausibility structure in the populace that leads to intuitively understanding Christianity is true, right, and good.
Okay. So I don't want to go on a solo YouTube rant about this because I definitely can. I have so many thoughts. But I want to give you the floor first and just kind of hear, when you hear a pastor essentially say the more blue an area is or a state is, the less Christian or the less, the less churches are there. How do you respond to that? Because I have my own thoughts, but you go first. I insist.
Well, I'm gonna say first, I enjoy the Whitaker rants. So once we get time, I want that rant. Man, first of all, I want to know what pastors he's referring to. Mm-hmm. That he said that would verify this all capital truth.
Yeah,
I'd like to know that, but I think I already know that. It's interesting to me though. Like again, when we talk about what's considered normative and what's considered fringe and other, there is always an assumption. So let me say it like this, actually. So I was thinking about this when I was watching the Grammys and how Jelly Roll gets on stage, makes an appeal about Jesus, makes all the news stories, and everybody's talking
Yep.
about Jelly Roll, talking
Yep.
about Jesus. And yet, Kendrick Lamar, reference God and giving thanks to God in his acceptance speech. Other artists, so like when Black folks talk about their faith, it don't make news. With sport analogy, when Tim Tebow kneels and talks about his faith, everyone's like, oh my God, such a crusader for faith. But yet Steph Curry, he talks about God on the reg. And so for some reason, there's just this thing that I've noticed where when white folks perform Christianity, perform faith, it's always a news story.
Yep.
But Black folks that where faith is so intricate to our identity and our lives and how we live, it's never a story. It's never considered to be anything. And so when this pastor is talking about these churches, like, is he talking about Black churches? Are Black churches included in the math that he is, considering here? When I think about here in New England, a quote unquote blue area, man, I got 6 different churches up and down the same street with me. That's why we have to be clear. Say we're the First Baptist Church. So because when there's a second and a third and a fourth, we want to make sure we clear who was first.
Who was first? It was you.
Yeah. It ain't Solo Baptist Church.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and so there's always, I think, just these false narratives that continue to be perpetuated by these white evangelicals, where, again, if you're not practicing faith the way they do, you don't have faith. If you don't profess Jesus the way they say you should, you don't have faith. And those things happen in other parts of the church as well. I'm not going to sit here and be foolish to that. But when he's talking about this map, I'm curious what blue states he's talking about. He's talking about, places like Atlanta.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of Black churches in Atlanta. Is that what he's referring to? DC. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, this is pretty classic megachurch pastor math, right? There's no data cited. He just says the studies, what studies, where, who, how was it done?
Yeah.
I live in New Jersey. I live in one of the most progressive states in America. Our governor is creating a system where she recommends that we as citizens film ICE and upload it to this database so she can keep track of it. All right, I'm all in. I will tell you now, this, I can't vouch for this data, but I did a long time ago some basic math and came to the conclusion that essentially there's about 1 church per 3 square miles in my state, given how many churches there were. Now, again, this is homeschooler math. I'm not sure if it's accurate, but I will tell you, in this very blue state, there are churches all over the place. I can probably walk to 10 different churches, minimum, no problem. Okay. I grew up in a conservative fundamentalist Baptist church in New Jersey, right? And to your point, that's only including like the white churches I think of, right? That's not including there's a huge Brazilian population where I'm at. They have a Brazilian church. I don't think about those folks, right? So what's interesting is exactly that point is like, well, who are you talking about? What churches count to you? What pastors count to you? And how is that? Where's the correlation? The other part I'll say is that, let's just take him at his word. Let's say red states have a higher church population where the quote-unquote gospel in his mind is preached. You look at the outcomes of how people live in those states like Mississippi, they have poor quality of life. They are dying at higher rates of gun violence. They can't get affordable health care. Women are more likely to bleed out because they can't get access to abortions. Like, you look at even the income ratio. It ain't there. It ain't there. It ain't there.
Actually, because I wrote that on my paper listening to him. I'm like, what else would we find on that map?
Right.
When we overlay for some statistics on that map.
Yeah.
What's the education rate of the people there? What's the poverty rate of people there? Those are my questions. And so that begs another point. Y'all got all these churches. Go off with your bad self. You got all these churches, and you got all these people unable to provide basic cost of living for themselves, basic health care, basic education. and you think, hold on, let me how I want to word this.
No.
One, you think that that's something to be proud of because you got all those churches, and you think that God doesn't have anything to say to all y'all churches for the utter failure that you have been in these communities.
Right.
You call yourself a church, but the spirit ain't there. I don't believe the spirit is there. Especially when you have all these other outcomes from your churches.
Right. Well, that's like when I hear that this is the argument, right? The argument goes like this. Hey, look, when Jesus talks about feeding the poor, the hungry, and taking care of the sick, that's an individual mandate to the church. It's not the government's job. Well, if that's the case, y'all been sucking. Y'all been sucking. Because guess what? We're more poor than ever. People are still hungry. We're drowning in medical debt. So if that was your job, white church, like you insisted is, you failed. You failed. And we need something else to stand in the gap, right? Because you're not doing the job that you say you're doing.
I love that you did that. I love that you said that. And I love that you said it that way. Because they will say that's the church's job. But it's the job that you are still not doing.
Exactly. So move aside. Let's get some. Look, we're the world's. Now I'm going to start a Tim Whitaker rant, right? But we're the world's wealthiest country. There is no reason why we cannot have affordable health care for every person, including our undocumented neighbors. There's no reason why we can't do that. It's straight up cruelty, right? If we can find $100 billion plus for ICE in one budget cycle, right? We can find ways to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. We could do it. We could. We just choose not to. So
and as Christians leading that crusade,
right?
So
and this is a Christian nation. Where? How? Why? Yeah. So I'm with you. You know, it blows my mind that this kind of rhetoric works so effectively. But to be fair, I grew up in that world. It was effective for me because I never thought beyond my bubble.
And you know what this actually makes me think about, to the question you asked earlier too about the conversation between black churches and black theology and white churches. Our presence in those churches is a mirror to the original sin in this country and to the continuing sins that it perpetuates. Yeah. I've heard a mentor of mine say it when I was in seminary, and I've never forgotten it, when he said, black folks have always been the moral compass of American society. Yeah. We don't have a suffrage movement without black liberation movements. Right. Civil rights movements. We don't have movements for marriage equality without black liberation movements, civil rights movements. You name it, it was black folks at the forefront of those efforts to get those things started. And I think deep down folks know that. 100%. And black folks ain't gonna go into no church. Again, I think I just gotta say this. There are gonna be certain churches I'm not going to be invited into because of the gospel I'm going to preach there. Yep. And so folks aren't going to have me come. They're not going to worship alongside me because the word is going to be convicting in those ways that are going to feel very uncomfortable, very challenging. And I think that black people, and I'm going to say black in the theological sense, a lot, again, given the study that I am teaching for TNE, when James Cone talks about blackness, he talks about it as a symbol, right? As symbolic language. I talk about blackness in parabolic language, as it's a story that reveals or unveils some deeper truths or some universal truths. But what Cone talks about is, being black is about the color of one's heart, mind, and soul being where the dispossessed are. Right. Exactly. And so folks who are willing to be in solidarity with black people or to take on blackness, as Cone would say, not about the color of your skin, right? Not about biology, not about race, not about phenotype, but what is the color of your heart? Yes. The color of your mind and the color of your soul. And I think those are the things that are most troubling to the waters in white supremacist churches.
No, that's a really good thing to call out that isn't, I think, mentioned enough, especially to this audience, is that when Cone and many people are talking about whiteness and blackness, we're not talking about just skin color. It's what they represent, right? Mm-hmm. The underside of society, the oppressed, and that could be anyone. I think about white folks in Appalachia, right? There's language for that, right? As opposed to being on top, dominance, that kind of idea. And like I think Cohen says this in, is it Black Theology and Black Power? Or I forgot the name of that book, but I read it a long time ago. It's great. And he mentions that to really be in solidarity with the oppressed is to taste the sting of oppression. It's not just, holding up a sign or putting ally in your Instagram bio. It's actually getting in the trenches with your neighbors and being willing to put your body on the line in solidarity with the folks that empire is trying to stomp out. And that can be done different ways, but you have to think beyond the infamous picture of Nancy Pelosi and others kneeling with their African garb on, right? You have to think way beyond that. You got to think about way beyond that. What are the systems that have been designed since the beginning to make things happen largely how they're currently broken up, right? Why is there a massive wealth gap between Black Americans and white Americans? Right? Why is there mass incarceration of Black Americans at a much higher rate? Why are Black Americans more likely to be exonerated for convictions? Why is that? Right? It can't just be because they're just more criminal or they're lazy. That makes no sense, and that's pseudo racist science anyway. It's all been debunked. There's something else at play, right? There's a certain way. There's a certain maybe we could say antichrist demonic spirit that has been embedded into our a society that has rigged the system in a way where some people greatly benefit and other people are greatly unbenefited or disbenefited. I don't know, whatever the word might be.
Yeah.
The
opposite of benefit.
Whatever the opposite of benefit it is, it's that. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And so what's coming to my mind, and I'm gonna get I'm gonna get a little preachy with it here, is that too many people don't want to be crucified. They want to be the crucifier. Or at least be in the audience. And so I say that because when Jesus tells the disciples, if you want to live your life like me, when it says to follow me in that passage in Matthew, that word is, if you want to basically if you want to live like I live, if you want to walk the path that I'm walking, if you want to imitate me, you have to be willing to pick up your cross, right? That's what that text is saying. But when we talk about Jesus dying on the cross, I think one of the things that we do in our imagination is we assume that Jesus was the only one getting crucified in our imagination. Yes, we know there was two on the right side and on the left. Right. One gets to go with him in paradise that day. But for the most part, it's one person being crucified, maybe three. Jesus was one of thousands getting crucified regularly. Yeah. Jesus was not unique in that. Yeah. And so when Jesus says to pick up your cross, Jesus is picking up a cross, and a cross being the instrument of your own death. And he's picking up that cross and going to where other folks are being crucified already. And then saying to us, if we want to follow him, we have to pick up our cross too.
Right.
And so Jesus, to me, is showing us what an image of solidarity looks like, because he's saying, Jesus is deciding, I'm going to go put myself and my body where the crucified are.
That's
and
right.
If you want to follow me and be like me, you have to pick up your cross and come and put your body like me where the crucified are. Right. I'm not going to go be crucified and just be the only one that's going to do this, but I am choosing to be in solidarity with crucified people.
Right.
And so that's what this idea of what Cohen is saying around what blackness is, and being in solidarity. And I think so many of us, I'm going to keep it a buck, we not trying to be crucified.
Mm-hmm.
If I can be the Roman centurion who has the epiphany after he's crucified, that's the Lord, indeed, the Son of God, yep, I'd rather be him as opposed to actually being crucified myself.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of people's orientation to their faith and a lot of people's orientation to moments like these that we're living in.
Okay, we have to wrap in a minute, but I just had an epiphany. I want to share it with you in the audience.
Revelation.
I put something together. So crucifixion was only done to non-Roman citizens. It was really reserved for the worst of the worst, the outsider, the ones who were not part of the empire, right? Mm-hmm. So if we believe as Christians that Jesus is God incarnate in that Jesus shows us what God is like. God decides to take on the form of human flesh, not as empire, not as Caesar, not as even as a Roman citizen, but as a baby born into a feeding trough for animals. That's how he's born. And then he dies a death in solidarity with literally the most marginalized, whatever, dehumanized group of people that you can think of, right? The people that even the empire says, we don't like you, we hate you so much that we're only going to reserve this type of killing for you. And that's how Jesus chooses to die, right? The criminal's cross, the non-citizen's cross, so to speak. That is just a really wild thing to consider. Because I never really thought about what you said, Darrell, in that way. Like, obviously, I knew that, but it didn't click. Like, yeah, thousands of people get crucified in Rome that way. Jesus is choosing to go down that path, to join in their oppression or in being solidarity with that action, and let him, God, be humiliated by his own creation, right? And that should tell us something about the nature of what we believe as Christians that God is like. And newsflash to all the right-wing MAGA people out there, hello, Ali Stuckey, it looks nothing like your ICE enforcing God that is killing people at point-blank range, that is kidnapping citizens, right? Jesus would be on the opposite side. He'd be the one that you're tear-gassing. He'd be the one that you're shooting while in their car.
That's right.
That's where he'd be.
And I love that you made the connection for non-citizens. This is how we treat our non-citizens. Paul goes to Rome and he's beheaded, but because he's a citizen is why he gets beheaded in Rome.
Right. Clean death. Clean cut.
Jesus, Peter, the other apostles that we know of that got crucified, they were not seen as citizens of Rome, therefore weren't given that respect. And it is exactly what you said. It is a demonic spirit of the Antichrist that has now put the hammer and nails in the hands of Christ and called that righteousness and called that godly. There is nothing remotely about Jesus or God in any of that. And so my prayer as we wrap is that for those for whom the hammer and nails are in their hand, there is still hope and opportunity for repentance, for them for their humanity to be touched, for epiphany and revelation to meet them. There's still a chance to do that. And then for those who are just passive observers, watching from the crowd, there is still opportunity for us in that way too. But when we say we want to follow Jesus, we are being called to pick up the very instrument of our own death. That's what it means to deny yourself. When Jesus, when we talk about Jesus, says to deny yourself, and it's not just yourself, deny your family, deny your mama, your daddy, your brother, your sister, your wife, your kids, yourself. Deny all that to pick up the instrument of your own demise. That's what it means to follow me. If you want and choose to follow me. And not everybody can answer that call. And even when Jesus was crucified, the disciples scattered. It took some repentance and some learning and some growth and some wisdom with time before they too had to meet their own, sort of end in that way. So.
Wow. Well, Darrell, I think that's a thought-provoking note to leave all of us on. I have a lot to chew on. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know that you do a lot of public work now. You're on social media. Where can folks follow you if they want to see more?
Man, if you want to see more, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm also on Fanbase, but both of those are at Black and Educated Preacher. I'm on Threads at Black and Educated Preacher. You can also find me on Facebook at Darrell R. Hamilton II. And you can keep up with me here at the First Baptist Church, in Jamaica Plain. You can find me here, the executive pastor, doing ministry. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be with you, Tim. You're doing wonderful work, man. Thank you for creating and providing this platform for these types of things and conversations to take place. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
For sure. And don't forget, friends, you can find Darrell on TNE Connect, our private community space that has tons of classes, including what Darrell's currently teaching. You go to thenewevangelicals.com/connect. There is no cost to join. Nothing that we do has any cost associated with it, so it's totally free. Check it out, and thanks for tuning in.